Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are going to discuss a very important topical matter. And this afternoon, let's talk about Mark Golding, excuse me, the champion boy, right? Mark Golding has suggested that he is going to be the champion of change, the champion of much needed change in Jamaica. Now, I'm speaking particularly referencing his budget debate, which took place 2 days ago. And he suggested that this is his fifth contribution and perhaps the final, budget contribution on that side as opposition leader. He promises that the next presentation that he meets, he will be the incumbent government. He will be on the other side of Jamaica's parliament. Now, I must say that Marky G seems to be growing up in terms of his statement-like ability to render his speeches. And I thought that that was one of his special ones, the budget contribution. His contribution, I beg your pardon, to the budget debate that was held in Jamaica's parliament. Now, after having given lots of pleasantries, talking about the people who help him, the secretaries and his workforce, those who, enable him to put his facts together, perhaps write his speeches. And of course, he gave credit to his wife, Sandra, who he deems to be the bedrock of his performance as a politician and as a businessman. Now, Mark Golding seemed to have been a little bit religious, spiritual in his budget presentation this time around. He's suggesting that because Jamaica lacks ethics, that he is going to, ensure that the whole matter of spiritual development in Jamaica is emphasized. He did mention that the politicians might not be the ones to do so, but he will definitely consult with spiritual leaders whom he thinks has a lot of credit. But how does he know that? How can he consult with spiritual leaders that he deems have lots of credit? So he did quote Micah 6 verse 20. And that, if I recall very clearly, was the same text that was quoted by Dr. Ralph Gonzalez, who was on the campaign trail supporting the PNP government. Now, it says that, but lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt and where thieves do not break through nor steal. No, this is not what I was looking for. It's not, this is Matthew 6 verse, I'm sorry, Matthew 6 verse 20. I was looking for Micah 6 verse 20. It might not be the correct thing I have. Let me see if I have, but he quoted from this topic, which suggested that, is it Micah 6 verse 20? Is it 6 verse, probably not, maybe 12. Okay, well, I might have quoted from I might have written down the wrong quote from which he was quoting. Now, yeah, so Dr. Ralph, not doctor, but Mark Golding, these are his policy platform plans. He suggested that he's going to be a champion of change for Jamaica's much needed change, right? That we need some sort of transformation of our economy. Now, one of the things that I've been asking for some time, why do our politicians have to be always clapping the desk, striking the desk after every statement has been made? I find it to be infantile. It's time for parliamentarians to grow up, right? When you're making contributions like that, of that great significance and importance, it's very important that you listen keenly and afterwards, if there is something to clap about, but every little thing, every other statement, politicians are clapping, or every major policy plans that both speakers, whether it's the opposition or the government, mates, the parliamentarians begin to clap and talk among themselves like little teenagers. I find it to be gross. Important that we stop that. Now, it seems to me that, Mark Golding says that he wants to save the nation from stagnation, right? So he's suggesting that Jamaica is stagnated and is suffering from a stagnant economy, an economy that has not grown. And he's right, the economy has not grown. But also, his party has contributed significantly to the fact that we have not grown, particularly during the 1990s when they had their FinSAC debacle and the way in which they handled matters, causing the collapse of domestic business enterprises, which were the engine of the growth that has eluded us. Very important that we understand that the FinSAC business or businesses, the FinSAC businesses were the engines that would have created the growth that has eluded us over many years. So he's suggesting that the PNP is ready to deliver quality representation and good governance to the people of Jamaica. That's what Mark Golding is suggesting. Now, one of the things that I've realized when I present my videos is that people think when I'm quoting and I'm assessing things, it means therefore that this is my opinion, this is my value judgment. It's not so, right? I am simply stating and assessing what the opposition leader has said. Very important that you understand that, because you come back and you tell me that these are my words and I'm PNP and you judge me inappropriately and inaccurately. So he's suggesting that 69% of, I think I have here 69% of GDP. He's saying that since the government, he was lauding the government, that's the JLP government, that since they have been to power since 2016, thereabout, until now, Jamaicans have lowered their debt to 69% of GDP. So remember now that in 2013, we were 145% of GDP. And the fact that in 2025, we're now 69% of GDP, they're suggesting, and what Golding was suggesting, that that is something to celebrate. But at what expense, at what cost have we reduced the debt? And whose debt was it? That's the questions we have to ask, and I don't think that they're willing to tell us whose debt that we are paying down, right? Whom are we paying debt down for? Who are we reducing? Whom are we reducing the debt for? Mark Golding is lauding the efforts of both administrations to have halved the national debt to 69% of GDP. To which we are at the current moment. And I think that we are on track record to reducing it to 60% of GDP by 2028. That is what I got from his presentation. Now, the question I would like to ask both sides of the House, both the incumbent government and Mark Golding, the opposition leader, is why do we have to have the debt? Why is that important that we have the debt? And in a capitalist society, can any nation be totally debt-free? Can we be debt-free in a practical capitalist society, especially if we want to grow? Isn't the whole matter and the whole centerpiece of capitalism, the foundation of capitalism, is that one has to borrow to grow, but you don't just borrow blindly. You have a vision for which you are taking that particular business and nation state into. Now, I would like to pose another question. What is this obsession with reducing the debt to 60% of GDP? Is 60% a magical number? That is what I would like to ask. And how is this going to help us to move forward? Having reduced the debt to 60% of GDP, what next? What is the next phase of our development? I would like to ask a question. I'm wondering, our journalists are asking that question. I really wonder if they're doing that. I wonder if Cliff Hughes and George Davis on Nationwide are asking that question. Mark Golding continues to affirm that the lowering of the debt to 69% of GDP is a great national achievement. And I wonder for whom? For whom? And he reiterated this several times. May I suggest here also that when they're making their budget presentations, can they make it a little shorter? It's too long and lengthy, and lots of times too repetitive. Too repetitive. And the fact is that much of it is this, the heckling and the laughters and the shoutings at each other and stuff like that. I think that we need to reduce on the time. It's too lengthy and people would like to concentrate. Or is it deliberate for people not to listen to it so that you can just fool them, trick them, and do whatever the government, the politicians want to do? It might be a ploy, right? It could be a psychological method. Don't know. Just I'm requesting that the presentations, both by the leader of the opposition and the incumbent government, be significantly reduced, and just tell us what, in a nutshell, what you're going to do. He further acknowledged, that's Mark Golding further acknowledged, that reduction of the debt was achieved as a result of continuity of government adhering to fiscal discipline, right? So he said that many times that, give him his credit, that the JLP was able to continue what the PNP had left off in 2016. Much of what Mark Golding mentioned in his speech, in his contribution to the budget debate, Julian Robinson had already mentioned. I don't think he needed to have said a lot of things because we would have already been told that by Julian Robinson. He should have come now and just added the icing to the cake, and let us see how the PNP in a nutshell would have been, pursuing their development strategies or tactics. Now, Julian Robinson, Shadow Minister of Finance, revealed in his scintillating budget debate that the IMF castigated Jamaica in 2013 due to Golding's sudden abortion of the IMF agreement, right? So Julian Robinson did mention that the fact that, Bruce Golding and Audley Shaw aborted. And what Julian Robinson said is that they did not even inform the IMF when they decided to abort the program. They didn't call the IMF, they didn't write, they didn't send an email to the IMF. They just simply aborted the program and said nothing. That is what we were told by Julian Robinson in his budget debate, which I left out when I actually reviewed his budget presentation in the video I released some days ago. So very important that we understand that. So, Julian Robinson said that was one of the reasons why the IMF castigated us. In fact, Julian Robinson mentioned, which I have mentioned on many occasions in my videos, that the IMF, when, Peter Phillips was going back and forth from Washington, D.C. to Jamaica, from Jamaica to Washington, D.C. and back, that the IMF, the people in Washington, D.C. were always asking him, has Jamaica burned? Has Jamaica crashed? Right? Because it seems to me that the IMF wanted us to crash. And had it not been for the likes of the Yvette Clarks and the other African-American lady in Congress, what's her name again? I forgot her name. We would not have inked out an IMF agreement in 2013, and we would have certainly crashed. I don't believe that. I think we would have, but it was their deliberate attempt, was the IMF deliberate attempt to allow us to crash, right? And to set some very, rigid and austere IMF policies, which we are following slavishly to our detriment. Now, Chavez Johnson here in his book, Whatever Happened to Globalization, said on page 261, it is critically important to understand that the doctrine of globalism is a kind of intellectual sedative that lulls and distracts its third world victims while rich countries cripple them, ensuring that they will never be able to challenge the imperial powers. Right? So the fact that they have given us a sedative of an IMF, a rigid IMF agreement, and policies means that it's a sedative which has pacified us and made us into passive citizens. And that's why Jamaicans are not even protesting against it, because they have fooled us, they have tricked us, they have deceived us into believing that the IMF is going to be the foundation of growth, which has eluded us for the past 10 years or so. Now, while Golding applauded, which is very, very contradictory, and I find to be ironic, and it seems to me that he's confused, because at the same time he's lauding the JLP government and the PNP government, the previous PNP government, that they pursued a rigid, austere IMF policy, which has set the country back. He didn't say it has set the country back, but in my estimation, it has set the country backwards. He's suggesting that the JLP government, that national wealth is stagnant. So he's saying that the fact that we have excellent macroeconomic stability, which he did say that that is not the measuring stick for how how progressive, how prosperous an economy is, which is true. But if we are under this IMF rigidity and austerity, it's impossible for our economy to grow, because we don't have enough wiggle room to be able to set aside dollars to be able to invest in important aspects of our economy. So Mark Golding suggested here that national wealth is stagnant, which is true. Our economy is hardly growing. Our economy experienced negative growth, he says, in 2024, right? The credit rating Fitch suggests, according to Kim, that we have deep structural problems, right? High crime rate, and the fact that climate change would have contributed to our lack of development. Of course, the Fitch company, which is rating agency rather, which is closely aligned with the IMF and the World Bank, will have to, they will have to posit, factors which would have inhibited our lack of growth, because they know that they've contributed to it. So they have to concoct factors, and people believe them, So according to Golding, macroeconomic indicators do not always tell the full story of the strength or the prosperity of an economy, which is true. But that is what his PNP government did too. During their tenure in government, they were saying this is macroeconomic stability. That really matters. And that is an IMF, playbook. It's an IMF narrative, and they simply say it back to you. So while Golding is here, lambasting the incumbent government about macroeconomic indicators do not always tell the full story of the prosperity of an economy. Well, he is going to do the same. His PNP government did the same, because they understand that that is what the IMF aims for, only macroeconomic stability, not micro at all. Despite our low unemployment rate, Jamaica still suffers from low wages, chronic unemployment, and unstable income. This is what Mark Golding is suggesting here, that when they talk about the economy is doing so well and the low unemployment rate, but we still have what? Jamaica suffers from low wages, which is true, right? Chronic unemployment in the sense, and unstable income. The people's incomes are unstable, and lots of the jobs that they have are jobs that are temporary, contract jobs, jobs that are not permanent, and they do not come with benefits, sick leave, vacation leave, right, and a pension. Now, so that is what he suggested, and he thinks that that is horrible, that, the government of the JLP should be happy and should be delighted at the low unemployment rate. Now, Golding is suggesting also that we cannot look at the statistics and think that the formal statistics are telling the truth. But at the same time, what are they going to listen to? Right? I'm sure that if Mark Golding should become Prime Minister tomorrow, that he's going to quote from the official statistics. He's not going to listen to the people of Jamaica. But he did say, because he's on the opposition side, that statistics do not represent the reality of what is happening in Jamaica. According to Mark Golding, you can't use statistics to tell a struggling man that he is not struggling. Or you can't use statistics to tell a hungry child that he or she is not hungry. And you can't use statistics to tell an underpaid person or worker that they're well paid. And he's right. Because according to Mark Golding, people know what the reality of their lives is. People know what the reality of their lives is. They know. You don't have to use statistics. It's only there as a reminder to the government and to the populace that this is the reality. But oftentimes, the statistics in Jamaica do not align with the realities on the ground. And this is what Mark Golding is suggesting. He's right, but dare I say that this is also the height of hypocrisy, because their government does the same thing under Peter Phillips and also Portia Simpson Miller. They lauded the IMF austerity and rigidity, saying that we would have been on a path for growth even after 4 or 5 years. And after 10 years, we have not seen any growth at all, any major growth. No major growth has occurred under the rigid IMF program. Okay? Now, he mentioned some very important facts here, that Jamaica has the second highest rates of brain drain in the world. Jamaica has the highest rates of brain drain in the world, the second highest, not in the Caribbean or in the region, in the world. Or people, as soon as they get some skills, some education, they're gone, right? So the skills the Jamaica is left empty, right? Without the skills and the requisite education necessary to growth and development. And people in the diaspora still think that Jamaica can grow, and they're listening to what the politicians have to say when they understand that the country can't grow like that. The same thing is happening in Haiti, right? Their best academics, their best economists, their best language people have gone. They had to have left because of the economic fragility, the socioeconomic fragility that reigns supreme in the island of Toussaint Louverture. They had to have left. And the same thing is happening yearly, annually, in the land of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. The same thing is happening there. There is a correlation, and that is why right now we are the 2 poorest countries in the Caribbean and Latin American region. Jamaica and Haiti are the 2 poorest countries in Latin America and the Caribbean region. Now, another fact that Mark Golding mentioned is that the aspiration of our people is to migrate to other countries where there are better opportunities, he suggested, to survive, to step up in a life. And that's true, because Jamaica does not provide for them that opportunity to step up in a life. And many times they don't want them, even if they have the opportunity there, they don't want to give them that opportunity for them to step up in a life. As we saw what happened during FinSat, and the fact that the victims, some of whom were willing to pay down on the debt, to pay a higher money on the dollar, and P.J. Patterson and Dr. Omar Davis refused. The fact that they were willing to pay 25 or so cents on the dollar to pay off their debt, right? And they accepted somebody, a foreigner from the United States, who was willing to pay 10 cents on every dollar, when the people of Jamaica were willing to pay 25 cents on every dollar. It shows you that it was never the intention of Dr. Omar Davis and P.J. Patterson to help those people, because they wanted to have helped, and they were the engine of the economic growth that has eluded Jamaica over the years. And that is why we are fast becoming a Haiti. Oftentimes, we like to blame, external shocks on the fact that we're not growing. But if you look at what is happening, we also have contributed to our lack of growth and development. Now, Mark Golding also highlighted the whole question, the whole issue of massive trade deficit. We're not producing enough. Our trade deficit imports, he suggested, are standing at $6.1 million annually. $6.1 million annually, while our exports stand at 1.5 million US dollars annually. So look at that huge gap, 6.1 imports. That's what $6.1 million annually of imports going into Jamaica, while our exports are 1.5 million US dollars. That is unsustainable and continues to impoverish us in every sense of the word. And you don't hear them batting an eye. You're not hearing statistics like these every day being given to the Jamaican people. All you're hearing that macroeconomic stability is great and we are doing well and wow, and let us jump and vote for Labour, right? Or we need to shower. It's incredible how the people in Jamaica behave. Now, Mark Golding, didn't FinSAC contribute to our astronomical trade deficit? Many of the companies which collapsed in the 1990s due to the PNP's toxic economic policies were domestic companies which were producing both locally and exporting surplus abroad. This gap is financed through remittances. So this is what, that is what he suggested, that the gap between that we see is 6.1 to $1.5 million per year. The gap that we have there of, what is it, 4 point something million dollars, US dollars that is, have to be cushioned or financed through remittances. And now we understand that remittances are being threatened by Trump's rigid also immigration policies, right? His hostile, outrageous, and rigid immigration policies. That's incredible. Now, so Mark Golding obviously suggested that we need to rely less on imports and become more self-reliant, right? Now, he suggested that in 2013 to 2014, that there was something set in law. There was a law that was enforced or written to reduce the debt to 60% of GDP. So that law was written into effect. It's a law, right? So whether Jamaicans like it or not, we have to reduce the debt to 60% of GDP. I don't think that this was given to us or told to us in 2013 to 2014 during the PNP government. I don't think it was. I think it's just in recent years that we found out that we have to go to 60% of GDP. They lied to us. They did not tell us. And you can correct me. I can't recall in 2013, but that's a long time. 2014, the PNP putting forward to Jamaicans, right? Making it a part of their consciousness, their conscious reality that we had to reduce our debt to 60% of GDP. If you can remember, please do so and inform me and tell me, send me the quotation, the source from which you obtained that. Now, the annual reform that has created Jamaica's long-term stability began under the Porter Simpson Miller administration. That's what Mark Golding says, that, they started it. They are the daddy of this economic miracle that Jamaica is actually experiencing. we're experiencing an economic miracle, even though we are stagnant. And that is what I heard Andrew Hollis saying, and I will present that in another video on in his budget presentation yesterday. My tongue is being tied when he mentioned that Mark Golding seems to be confused. Because at one time he's saying that the government, the incumbent government, has done a good job in terms of, maintaining stability and achieving macroeconomic stability. On the other end, he's saying that the economy is stagnant. But it is true. The two is true at the same time. That even though we are seeing macroeconomic stability, according to them, but Jamaica's economy is stagnant, perhaps going backward. Mark Holding suggested that the PNP did the heavy lifting, having taken Jamaica out of a debt crisis on a sustainable and put Jamaica on a sustainable fiscal path, right? So that's Jamaica's baby, right? That the IMF policy is Jamaica's baby. But he says that the GLP government that has benefited to a large extent from what the PNP did, they are actually running with it. Now, Mark Golding mentioned the fact that the JLP government is using revenues from the shares that they have sold from the Norman International Airport and also from the Trans Highway. This is a Trans East-West Highway. That they have sold shares to foreigners, it seems. Revenues that he suggested that should be for the future. They are collecting them as a whole and then pulling it back into the economy. So the revenues that we're expecting the next probably 5 or 10 years from now will no longer be there, because this present government would have already collected them and used them into other things that they want to do. And he's suggesting that not $1, not 1 cent of the revenues from the shares that they have sold are going into the building of hospitals, schools, or a dam, a water reservoir. Yeah, nothing, according to him, is going into those important infrastructure. He suggests that Jamaica needs to grow stronger and faster, and that is true. And the GLP government, he lambasted them, did say that they were going to grow 5 in 4 years, and the GLP set up an economic growth ministry to have done that. They had growth ambassadors, right? And all of this, as he suggested, as Mark Golding suggested, has proven to be a colossal failure, which is true, right? All of this economic growth, and I remember Auburn Hill, and he was one of those, economic growth ambassadors, and nothing has become of it. Nothing has become of it, because it was all a lie. It was all an act that they played on the people. Now, Mark Golding went on to say that there was negative growth in the entire year of 2024, ending the year in a recession with 2 quarters of negative growth. So he's defining, a recession as 2 quarters of negative growth. So when the GLP is actually rejecting that we're not in a recession, he's suggesting that we are, according to the definition, the basic standard definition of a recession. He says that Jamaica has the lowest growth in the Caribbean except for Haiti. Jamaica has the lowest growth in the Caribbean except for Haiti. And Haiti has its own unique set of challenges, which is true. Maybe if Haiti was not going through a lack of governance or government right now, they would be far ahead of Jamaica. Right? They would be far ahead of Jamaica. But that's the country that we're competing with. Perhaps we might not have a government soon too, if we continue on this trajectory. Right? We might not have a reigning government, a sitting government, if we continue to travel on the path on which we're treading. So Mark Golding continues to say that the GLP government hasn't achieved vigorous growth based on the foundation that the PNP left them and had built for them. So he says that he's going to build the economy and he's going to ensure that, social justice and equality and equality of opportunities for all. And he's going to create a progressive economy. And where is he going to get that money from? Who is going to give Mark Golding all of that money to build that progressive economy? Great job if he could. But the fact of the matter, when you look at the geopolitical realities, I would say that it is not feasible at the moment. In the 1990s, when we should have been building, and Mark Golding, I understand that you were an advisor to the then Minister of Finance, Dr. Omar Davis. Why didn't you tell him that we needed to have built a vigorous economy? Because we needed at the time vigorous economic growth. Why did you, Mr. Golding, Mr. Mark Golding, contributed to the FinSAC debacle? Why did you contribute? Why did you contribute? Did I say contributed? Why did you contribute to the FinSAC debacle, right? That is something that I would like to pose to Marky G, right? So the PNP, according to Mark Golding, to Marky G, is going to create better paid jobs. How is he going to do that? We don't know, right? He's going to improve the infrastructure. He's going to lift people out of poverty. He's going to lift the Jamaican people out of poverty. Somebody who's coming from that, segment, from that stratum of the Jamaican society, is going to lift Jamaicans out of poverty, right? Why didn't he attempt to do so under, well, he wasn't in government during PJ Patterson, but he was advisor to them. He's going to provide, according to him, opportunities for all Jamaicans, not some Jamaicans, but for all Jamaicans, according to Marky G. And he's going to build a Jamaica, not only for the few, but for the many. So he's suggesting right now that we have an oligarchy in Jamaica, but he is going to transform the Jamaican society into a real democracy for the many and not for the few, right? That is what he implied in his debate. Now, as I mentioned here, and I wrote it down here, that Mark Golding's presentation was too verbose, repetitive, and lengthy, right? So try to make it less lengthy. Okay, so we have that growth is the only way we can achieve our people out, we can lift our people out of poverty. That is what Mark Golding is saying. And he purports here that this is his proposal to bringing growth to the Jamaican economy. Efficiency, that's number one. Education, number two. Energy, number three. And four, emerging industries, which is going to talk about creation of small businesses and, creating an economy that is favorable and, amenable to businesses, right? To small businesses and to business and entrepreneurs. Now, he emphasized, as Mark Golding emphasized, the whole importance of ethics in defining the level of prosperity in an economy. So Mark Golding said here that ethics is the defining factor between the government that Golding will lead and that of Andrew Holness's led government. He's suggesting that Andrew Holness's led government doesn't have any ethics. They don't know what ethics mean, but he is going to definitely become an ethical character. So he talked about the moral decay of the social fabric of our society, the callousness he talked about of our society, which nobody can disagree with. Our society is callous, it's uncivilized, and very coarse and boorish. Now, he says that PJ Patterson tried with his values and attitudes program, but that is true, but that was just theoretical because at the same time, Mr. PJ Patterson didn't have any values and attitudes himself. Then what happened during FinSAC, that was a valueless man. And if you listen to what Don Crawford said about him and how he threatened him, to have left Jamaica and all of that stuff, that is a person who doesn't seem to have a lot of values to me, right? So to whom was PJ Patterson speaking or preaching, right? To whom was he preaching? I am not sure. So he said, Mark Golding is suggesting that time come now for principles that will embrace the spiritual, moral, and ethical development of Jamaica. Now, Mark Golding spoke about the callousness that is pervasive in the Jamaican society. Yet him said that it's time now that we have Philly language. We have to create Philly language. We have to create it. We have to have Philly language. But the fact of the matter is that Philly language is what also has contributed to the lack of civility and also the coarseness and the bullishness in Jamaica. Right? The society lacks refinement. The society in Jamaica lacks refinement. It still smacks of plantation-like syndrome, if you will. Now, he went on to talk about the fact that many of our students are absent from school, right? They leave school, 20% of secondary students leave without the requisite skills, without gaining 5 subjects and more, right? Talk about the many children that can't go to school because of, lack of lunch money and other things. So he says that he will be implementing a school feeding program for all students who need it, which is good for all who need it. Maybe some don't need it, but he's going to have, you need it, you'll get it. You need your breakfast, you can go and get it. I think it's lunch. They will start out with lunch, which is very important. And then they will ease into having breakfast. So he talks about the EASE program that he'll be instituting, the RIDE program for rural students who won't be able to, can't, afford bus fare, and for senior citizens there, which he will need to develop more. He needs to, flesh this more, to flesh it out more so we can understand what he's suggesting, what he's going to do to help these people. He talks about building entertainment zones for social events, right? And talked about the whole matter of giving Jamaicans more grants for film production. He says that Jamaica has capacity for film development and production, but oftentimes it's a lack of monies and grants that are not available or are not given to the people. I think he said that 400 grants were offered to Jamaican filmmakers, and not one of them has received that grant to date. I find that to be mind-boggling. Now, he also suggested that Mark Golding, that he'll be conferring national hero status to the following people: Robert Nesta Marley and also to Louise Bennett Coverley. And my question to him, do we need more cultural heroes or heroines? Do we need more cultural heroes or heroines? And I say a categorical no to that. We don't need any more cultural heroes and heroines. What we do need at the moment are economic heroes. People, whether it's Mark Golding, if you can lift the Jamaican economy out of its economic doldrum, out of its economic lethargy that we find ourselves in at the moment, then I would say, yes, you should become a hero, right? But we don't need any more cultural heroes at the moment. Let this Robert Nesta Marley and Coverley, what's her name? Louise Bennett Coverley. They're still cultural icons, and that's what we value. In fact, we don't need any more dead heroes, or let our heroes be alive, right? We don't need any more dead heroes. The only time many of our citizens remember our heroes or national heroes are just when we probably go to the airport and we see all these national heroes, or during the Heroes Day, cultural, what do you call it, Heritage Week, right? Apart from that, people don't live with these heroes in their consciousness. Many Jamaicans don't even know about many of our heroes. They only know their names, but they do not know what they stood for. Now, to end, he talked about the fact that crime is out of hand and that the states of emergencies that the government of Jamaica, that's under the Andrew Holness's led government, instituted it from 2017 to 2023, did not work. And I agree with him. I applaud him for saying that. But ironically again, and hypocritically, Mr. Golding, your government supported them, and you did acknowledge that even though you were stridently against the fact that they were implementing states of emergency, which were not helping the nation to bring down the crime and violence, according to you, according to Mr. Golding, they stubbornly refused to continue with SOC policies. They continued, I should say, to continue with their SOEs, that's states of emergency policies, which are not effective at reducing crime, the crime rate in Jamaica. They're not effective, right? Yet still, the PNP government supported them all through the years, even though they pretended as if they were not supporting them in Parliament. Mark Golding suggested that more people have been murdered under Andrew Holness' 2 terms in government than in any other administration. That's according to him. I think he said they have had 4,000 or more additional murders than there would have been in other previous administrations. Don't know about that. I don't have any access to that sort of statistics. But that is possible because we really have had a serious crime problem since Andrew Holness came into office, right? Serious crime problem happened. So he suggested that he is going to look at the root cause of criminality, that's Mark Golding, and he's going to look at peace, law and order, and he's going to build from the ground up. Well, part of the root cause is the fact that many of the guns coming into the United States, from the United States into Jamaica, are unaccounted for, and some of our politicians and business elites are involved in that trafficking of arms into Jamaica. He did not mention anything about that. Mark Golding did not mention anything about one of the main root causes of crime and violence in Jamaica, apart from the poverty and the lack of development, is the fact that the United States of America, right, imports, sends, traffics lots of powerful weapons into Jamaica, firearms into the country. And some of our politicians, I shall not call them names, are involved in this trafficking of arms, and some of our financial business elites. And they're not going to give up the trafficking anytime soon. So we can expect that many more Jamaican lives will be slaughtered. Very important that you understand that, right? He suggested that he's going to try to reduce food imports, as the previous Minister of Agriculture, what's his name again, the one who died? His name was on my tongue. Yeah, he was the one who actually, he said Irish potato out of the import basket. He took Irish potato out of the import basket, and we were producing enough. Yeah, I forgot his name. Roger Clark, right? Roger Clark. He suggested that Roger Clark had taken Irish potatoes out of the import basket, which means that we were producing for ourselves, and that the GLP government abolished that and went back to importing lots of Irish potatoes into the country. Now, from a superficial lens, Mark Golding's presentation was impressive. It was what the people wanted him to say, right? And I think that he went on the ground and he listened to the people, or he sent researchers to have listened to the people. He has heard their cries, and the PNP, having been out of office, and they're not, you know, they don't have to execute the rigors and the complexities of running a government. They don't have to deal with that. Then they're able to, you know, spend more time on the ground listening to the plight of the Jamaican people. And I think that they have listened, and they are articulating, they have fleshed out some of our deep structural problems. The fact is that at this critical juncture of our nation's history, I don't think that they have the stamina. I don't think they have the courage to stand up to our Jamaican elites who are the helm of keeping our people backwards. I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they have the moral courage to stand up to the geopolitical actors, because a lot of what they have stated, both Andrew Holness and Mark Golding, I'm referring to Mark Golding now because that's the speech that I'm assessing, but they have not mentioned anything about the geopolitical challenges that they are going to be faced with and that they're being faced with at the moment. Nothing was mentioned about that. We are still in an era in which they present to us debates as if we are running the show, when we are not running the show. Okay? And this is a problem having with them. And so they make speeches based on the naivete of Jamaicans. They know that Jamaicans are largely ignorant people, and that is what they're doing. They're exploiting the ignorance of the people. And the people are not able to perceive and to discern that much of what Mark Golding has said, he will not be able to achieve. Because we still have to put the debt down to 220 by 2028 to 60% of GDP. And we don't know if, having done that, we will have to further go down. We don't know. We don't know. And we don't know what the future holds. But I guess they have to give you something for you to chew on. And when all is said and done, I think that he delivered a very interesting and commanding budget presentation from a superficial perspective. That is what I think. But I don't think that the goals are achievable, because a lot of the truth also is hidden, as I suggested, with the whole matter of arms being sent to Jamaica, and many of which, and this trafficking of which I should suggest, is controlled by the very politicians. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for joining. I'll see you in another video. Remember now to like, share, and subscribe.